All right, so I'm going to show you guys a few different ways to create different textures and details while you paint. So hopefully this helps you as you get ready to paint your project. So I have my paint. I'm not going to mix it to make different colors today. I'm just going to use it to show you guys the different techniques. And then I have a paintbrush, one wet and one dry, and then a cup of water. Also have some paper towels that I almost forgot to grab, but now I have them, so we're good. All right, so the first one I'm going to show you is just a basic wash with some paint. So I have my wet paintbrush. I'm just going to use red, and I can just paint. Remember, I showed you guys the more water you add, the lighter the color is going to be. So that's one way you can get pink if you want pink, is to use red with a lot of water. So then, now that I have this light color, I'm gonna actually use that to layer on top of. So if you wanted to show some texture on top of a background color, you could just dip your paintbrush then into a new color and try to layer on top. I like to dab my paintbrush, but if you were looking for a different texture, you could stroke your paintbrush. You could kind of mix it in by swirling it around. And since the paint underneath is still wet, it's going to kind of turn it to a different color, which is kind of cool. So that's something you could try. Another thing while painting is to think about how you paint. So just like if you're coloring, usually you want to color with short and small strokes in one direction. So kind of the same thing with painting. You can paint in the same direction, going up and down or from side to side. Or you can do something that's called scumbling, and that's where you swirl your paintbrush, and that's going to give it a little bit of a different look because of the brush strokes and the directions. So again, that's called scumbling. So you could do that to fill in, or you could go up and down or side to side. Another nice technique to try is dry brush. So that's exactly what it sounds like. I have a paintbrush that I haven't dipped in water yet. It's completely dry, and I'm just going to paint with that. And you will see that you can really see the bristles when you paint like that. It dries really quickly. The paint doesn't spread as nicely because there's no water in it. So if you want to show a lot of texture, you can try rubbing the paintbrush all over the paper as it is dry, and it will look a little more rough than if you paint with water. Another technique that we also talked about with colored pencils is called stippling, and that's where you kind of dot and dab your paintbrush. So you're just getting the tip of the paintbrush. You can also blend your paint. So instead of mixing your colors on your mixing palette, you can just do it on your paper. So if I take some red and then I take some blue, you'll see that they start to blend together. So I've got red, purple, and blue still showing up. So it's blended right on the paper. Another one for details is if you layer on top of dry paint. So this spot right here is pretty dry. So if I go on top of that right now with some more paint, my paint that's on top is going to be a lot darker than the background. And I can try adding different details by stippling or doing some cross hatching on top of there to get different textures. Again, the paint on the first layer should be dry to do that technique. Lastly, there's a technique called sgraffito, and that is where you essentially are drawing into the paint. So if I take the other end of my paintbrush, kind of can use that as a pencil and draw inside where I've painted. You could even write something and do whatever you want on top of the wet paint. But again, the paint needs to be wet in order to do that. So those are a few different techniques you can try and see what happens. It's always good to experiment. Happy painting.